Nobody is coming to save you. I need you to sit with that sentence for a moment before we go any further. Not your father, not a partner, not a lucky break that finally arrives at the right time, not the universe eventually deciding it is your turn. Nobody. And the reason I am starting here, the reason this is the first thing you are hearing, is because everything else in this video builds on your willingness to accept that truth completely. Not with bitterness, not with despair, but with the kind of clear-eyed honesty that the Stoic philosophers considered the very beginning of wisdom, the beginning of a life actually lived rather than merely endured. Here is what I have observed about men who are struggling. Not financially struggling, not career struggling. Men who are struggling inside. Men who wake up every morning with a quiet feeling that something is fundamentally off, that the life they are living does not match the life they know. Somewhere beneath all the noise they are capable of. Those men are rarely lacking intelligence. They are rarely lacking talent or opportunity. What they are consistently lacking is a code, a personal standard, a set of principles they live by not because someone is watching, not because it is convenient, but because of who they have decided to be. Aristotle, who spent his entire intellectual life studying what separates men who flourish from men who merely survive, wrote this in his Nicomachean Ethics. The quality of a man is determined not by what he does in exceptional moments, but by his habits, by the small daily choices that no one witnesses and that compound over time into character. Most men were never given a code. They were given opinions instead of principles. They watched the men around them chase, beg, perform, shrink, tolerate. And because that was all they saw, that was all they knew. This video is about something different. This video is about 10 principles, 10 Stoic-rooted standards that separate the man who is building from the man who is waiting to be built. If this is the video you needed to hear today, stay with me through every single commandment. The ones that are most uncomfortable are almost certainly the ones you need most. And before we begin, subscribe to the Stoic Truth right now. Hit the notification bell. Every week on this channel, we bring you the philosophy that the greatest men in history used to build lives of genuine strength and genuine purpose. This is exactly that kind of video. Commandment 1. A man who knows his worth never chases. What should come, willingly never beg for love. Say those 4 words slowly, because I want you to understand something about begging that most conversations around this topic miss entirely. Begging is not just something you do with your mouth. It is something you do with your energy, your time, your presence, with the 1,000 quiet ways a man makes himself smaller, hoping that someone will finally choose him. It is the message sent late at night after hours of silence. It is the apology given for things that were not your fault. It is the gradual, almost imperceptible process of changing your opinions, your plans, your personality, becoming whoever you think she needs you to be so that she will stay. And the devastating truth about all of that effort is this: it never works. Not because love is cruel, but because attraction does not respond to desperation. It never has. It never will. The psychologist Abraham Maslow, in his studies of the highest functioning human beings he could find, identified one quality they shared above almost all others. They did not seek love, approval, or validation as a primary motive. They gave those things freely, but they did not need them returned in order to remain whole. That internal wholeness is precisely what makes a person genuinely attractive in every domain of life. Because desperation communicates one message louder than anything else you could ever say: I do not believe I am enough. And if you do not believe it, the world has no reason to believe it either. The Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, Epictetus's own teacher and one of the most rigorous moral thinkers in the ancient world, wrote that a man who cannot be content with himself will find no contentment in anything external. He was describing something psychologically precise. The search for external validation is not a love problem, it is an identity problem. It is the symptom of a man who has not yet settled into a clear and honest understanding of his own value, not compared to other people, not dependent on anyone's approval, but rooted in his own character, his own consistency, his own standards. A man who knows his worth does not chase, not because he is cold, not because he does not feel, but because he understands that love, which must be begged for, is not love. It is performance. And no performance, no matter how convincing, ever becomes real. Performance. And no performance, no matter how convincing, ever becomes real. Drop this in the comments if this one landed. I know my worth. Commandment. 2. Wealth is quiet. Desperation is loud. Never perform success. Two men walk into a room. The first talks about what he owns, what he drives, what he paid, what he is building. He makes sure you know. The second man sits down. He listens more than he speaks. He does not mention what he owns. He does not perform his success. He simply is. Which man do you respect more? Which man actually has power? The man who is genuinely wealthy, financially, mentally, spiritually secure in himself, does not need you to know it. He already knows it. And that knowing, that deep, settled confidence that does not require anyone else's confirmation, is one of the most powerful things a man can carry. The man who is insecure, spending money he does not have on things he does not need to impress people who do not care. That man is not projecting success. He is advertising emptiness. Approval bought with money is not respect. It is rent. It expires the moment you stop paying. Seneca wrote in one of his lesser-read letters, Letter 20 to Lucilius, something that deserves to be read in full. It is not the man who has little who is poor, but the man who craves more. He was not making an argument for poverty. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He was making an argument for sufficiency, for the profound freedom of a man who has decided what is actually enough and is no longer being driven by the need to prove anything to anyone. A high-value man builds. He does not perform. He saves. He invests. He thinks in years, not in impressions. He is not interested in looking rich. He is interested in being free. And financial freedom, the ability to make choices based on what you genuinely want rather than what you can barely afford, is one of the most concrete and practical forms of power available to any man. Guard your resources the way you guard your reputation. Both are built slowly and lost quickly. If you are building real wealth instead of performing fake wealth, drop this in the comments. I build in silence. Commandment. 3. The moment you tolerate disrespect, once it becomes a pattern. 0 tolerance. This one is uncomfortable, but it is necessary because most good men, kind men, men who genuinely care, have at some point absorbed a disrespect and told themselves it was not a big deal. She was having a bad day. He did not mean it like that. It is not worth the conflict. And so they swallowed it quietly and moved on. And the other person noticed, not always consciously, not always deliberately, but they noticed that this man has no line. And so the disrespect happened again. Here is the psychology of why this matters beyond the immediate discomfort. When you absorb disrespect without response, you are training the people around you in how to treat you. You are sending a signal through your silence, through your continued presence, through your willingness to proceed as if nothing happened, that this behavior is acceptable. People rarely test limits because they are malicious. They test limits because the limits have not been made clear. And a man whose limits are unclear is a man whose life becomes gradually filled with situations he never consciously chose. Epictetus understood this. In his discourses, he wrote that the philosopher's first task is to keep his ruling faculty free from errors, not to manage other people, but to ensure that his own responses reflect his own values. Zero tolerance does not mean aggression. It does not mean drama or explosion. It means calm, clear, unmoving. It means saying once, quietly, and with complete certainty, "That is not how you speak to me." And then, following through, not with threats, with consequence. Because a man whose words are backed by consistent action is respected even by the people who tested him, especially by them. If you are done accepting less than you deserve, comment, standards up. Commandment 4. Open the door. Keep walking. Never beg someone to stay who has decided to leave. This is the most painful commandment, so I need you to stay with me all the way through it. I am not telling you that love does not hurt when it walks out the door. It does. Anyone who tells you it does not is either lying or has never loved anything real. Loss hurts. It is supposed to. That is how you know it mattered. But there is a critical difference between feeling the pain of loss and destroying your own dignity, chasing someone who has already decided to leave. Between grieving something real and bargaining with your self-respect in the hope that desperation will change someone's mind. The Stoics had a concept for this distinction. They called it the difference between a preferred outcome and a necessary one. You can prefer that she stays. You can hope for it. You can grieve when she does not. But the moment her staying becomes necessary for your sense of wholeness, you have placed your inner stability in the hands of something you cannot control. And everything built on that foundation is unstable. The philosopher Epictetus wrote in his Enchiridion, a passage far less quoted than the famous lines but arguably more useful. Never say of anything that I have lost it, only say I have returned it. That framing is not cold, it is not indifferent. It is the philosophical practice of accepting that nothing external was ever fully yours to begin with, not in the permanent, unconditional sense. And the man who has genuinely absorbed that understanding does not beg. He feels the pain completely, without performing stoicism and without performing collapse. He opens the door. He wishes her well in his heart. And he keeps walking, not because he is hardened, because he understands that the right love will not require him to lose himself in order to keep it. If you know your worth is not determined by who stays, drop this in the comments. I let go with dignity. Commandment 5. Your peace is your power. Remove the manipulators without guilt. Let me describe someone you might recognize. Every conversation finds its way back to their feelings, their needs, their problems. When something goes wrong, it is never their fault. When something goes right, they made it happen. They make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They make you feel selfish for having needs. They make you feel irrational for noticing what you are noticing. They twist your words. They rewrite history. They use your loyalty like a leash and your love like a tool. This is manipulation, and it is one of the most energy-draining, clarity-stealing, life-diminishing things a man can allow into his world. Here is what it actually costs you, stated precisely. It costs you clarity, because when someone is constantly reframing reality, you lose trust in your own perception, and a man who cannot trust his own perception cannot make good decisions. It costs you time. The hours spent replaying conversations and trying to figure out what you did wrong are gone forever. It costs you peace. And your peace, as we will discuss in the final commandment, is not a luxury. It is the foundation on which everything else in your life is built. Carl Jung wrote something that applies directly to this dynamic. The most dangerous thing is to confuse the love of another person with the need for another person. Manipulation thrives in need, in the gap between who you are and who you believe you need to be accepted and loved. The man who has done the work of understanding his own worth does not need anyone's approval badly enough to tolerate the destruction of his peace in exchange for it. Guard your inner life the way you guard your most valuable asset, because it is. If you are choosing peace over chaos starting today, drop this in the comments. Peace is power. Commandment 6. Self-respect means closing doors that hurt you. Never return to what has already ended. Going back is easy to rationalize. The mind is extraordinarily creative when it wants something. You tell yourself she has changed, that the timing was wrong, that what you had was rare, and that nobody will ever understand you the same way. And maybe some of those things are true. But here is the question you need to sit with honestly before you walk back through a door you already closed. Are you returning because something genuinely new is present? Real accountability, real growth, real change in the pattern? Or are you returning because the familiar pain is more comfortable than the unfamiliar freedom? The ancient philosopher Heraclitus wrote that you cannot step into the same river twice, not because the river moved, because you both moved. The relationship you are considering returning to does not actually exist anymore. What exists is a new version of the same dynamic, carrying all the learned patterns, all the established permissions, all the precedents you set the first time about what you would and would not accept. And unless something fundamental has genuinely changed in both people, not just promised, genuinely changed, returning is not a second chance. It is a more informed version of the first mistake. A high-value man does not return to closed chapters out of pride. He returns to closed chapters as an active choice only when genuine transformation is evident. In behavior, not in words. Because words are easy, and behavior over time is truth. There is someone ahead of you who will choose you completely, who will not make you compete, who will not make you wonder. But you cannot reach them while you are standing in the entrance of a door that should remain closed. If you are closing old doors and walking towards something better, comment, chapter closed. Commandment 7. The high-value man solves problems. He does not wait for rescue. Let me say something that will land differently depending on where you are in your life. Nobody is coming, not to fix your situation, not to hand you the life you want, not your parents, not the government, not a mentor who appears at exactly the right moment, not fate. Nobody. And the sooner you accept that completely, not with despair, but with the kind of quiet, settled power that comes from accepting hard truths, the sooner your life begins to actually move. Here is what waiting for rescue does to a man that most people never fully examine. It keeps him in a position of learned helplessness, a psychological state identified by the researcher Martin Seligman, in which repeated experiences of uncontrollable outcomes teach a person to stop trying, even when trying would actually work. Waiting for rescue reinforces the belief that outcomes happen to you rather than through you, and that belief, held long enough, becomes indistinguishable from reality. The man who believes he is powerless eventually becomes powerless, not because he lacked ability, but because he stopped exercising it. Aristotle wrote that the function of a human being, what we are distinctly equipped to do that nothing else can, is to exercise reason in purposeful action, not to wait, not to hope, to think clearly and act deliberately. A high-value man looks at his problems and asks one question: what can I do today, with what I currently have, from exactly where I currently am? Not who will help me, not when will things get easier, not why is this happening to me. What can I do? And then he does it, not perfectly, not always successfully, but he moves. Because movement is the only currency that actually buys change. Start with what you have. Build from where you are. The man you are waiting to become cannot be found in waiting. If you are done waiting and ready to build, drop this in the comments: I am my own rescue. Commandment 8. If she makes you compete, she has already chosen someone else. Never compete for love. Love is not a competition, and any relationship that requires you to compete for it, any dynamic where you are constantly proving yourself worthy, where your position feels uncertain no matter how much you give, where jealousy is used as a tool rather than appearing as a natural vulnerability, that is not love. It is a power dynamic dressed in the language of love. And those two things are not the same. A high-value man competes in every area where competition makes him better. He competes in his work, his craft, his growth, his physical capability, his mental development. Competition in those domains is productive. It sharpens, it elevates, it reveals gaps that need to be filled. But love is not a domain where competition produces those outcomes. When a woman has genuinely chosen you, when her actions match her stated feelings consistently and without prompting, you do not feel like you are competing. You feel chosen. The security is not naive. It is earned by her consistent behavior over time, not by your performance in response to manufactured uncertainty. The Stoic Hierocles wrote about what he called the concentric circles of our relationships, and his essential point was that the quality of each circle is determined not by the intensity of emotion you invest in it, but by the reliability of what it gives and what it asks. A relationship that asks for your constant performance and gives you chronic uncertainty in return is not a high-quality relationship, regardless of the emotional intensity it generates. See it as it actually is, not as you hope it might become if you just try a little harder. If what it actually is a competition you never signed up for, walk away. In clarity, not in anger. If you refuse to compete for love because you know your worth, comment, I am already chosen. Commandment 9. Build your own. Depend on yourself. First, independence is not isolation. It is freedom. Independence is not about needing no one. Let me be precise about this because the concept is frequently misunderstood. A high-value man is not a man who is closed to connection or incapable of vulnerability or unwilling to receive support. He is a man who has built enough of his own foundation, financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically, that he enters every relationship from a place of choice rather than necessity. That distinction is everything. When you are dependent on someone else for your financial survival, your emotional stability, your sense of identity, your daily sense of worth, you give them enormous power over your life. And even genuinely good people, even people who love you sincerely, will eventually make decisions based on their own needs that conflict with yours. That is not malice. That is humanity. But the man who has built his own foundation is not devastated by those moments. He adapts. He continues. He does not collapse because one external support shifted, because his essential stability is internal. The philosopher Cicero, who lost almost everything in the political collapses of late Republican Rome and rebuilt himself multiple times, wrote in his letters to Atticus that the only truly reliable possession a man carries is the quality of his own character and the skills of his own mind. Everything else can be taken. Character and developed capability cannot be removed from you. Build your income, build your physical strength, build your emotional resilience. Build genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than mutual need. Build your vision of the life you want, and then pursue it with the full weight of your capability. No one else can live your purpose. That is yours, and it is waiting for you to claim it. If you are committed to building your own life on your own terms, comment, "I build my own." Commandment 10. Anything that consistently steals your peace is stealing your power. Protect it absolutely. We have arrived at the final commandment, and this one sits above all the others. Not because peace is more important than action or more important than building, but because peace is the ground from which everything else grows. Your clearest thinking comes from a state of inner peace. Your best decisions come from peace. Your deepest creativity comes from peace. Your strongest relationships, your most powerful work, your most consistent discipline, all of it requires peace as its foundation. And anything that systematically destroys that foundation is not just an inconvenience. It is an active threat to your potential. Think about the things in your life right now that disturb your peace. Not the difficult things. Difficulty and challenge are the mechanism of growth, and the Stoics would be the first to tell you that a life without challenge is a life without development. I mean the things that bring chaos without growth, the relationship where every interaction leaves you more confused and less yourself. The habit you return to that numbs the pain in the short term and increases it in the long term. The environment that consistently shrinks you. The internal narrative about who you are that was written by someone else's opinion years ago and that you have been rehearsing ever since. Those things, let them go. Zeno of Citium, who founded the Stoic school after losing everything he owned in a shipwreck, described the goal of philosophy as eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but more accurately understood as the flourishing of a human life fully lived in alignment with its own values. That flourishing, Zeno argued, is not possible while the inner life is in constant chaos. Peace is not the reward that arrives when everything in your life is finally resolved. Peace is the daily practice of removing what is not yours to carry, focusing on what is genuinely within your control, and refusing to give the limited hours of your life to things and people and patterns that return nothing of value. A high-value man treats his peace the way a disciplined investor treats his capital. He does not give it to everything that asks for it. He deploys it carefully in things that grow, in people who genuinely add, in environments that elevate, in thoughts that build rather than erode. Guard your peace. It is not a luxury. It is your power. And a man operating from genuine inner peace is one of the most powerful presences in any room, not because he is performing strength, but because he is settled into something real. If you are choosing peace over everything that steals it, comment, "Peace over everything." Let me step back for a moment and say something directly to you. We have walked through 10 commandments, 10 principles that separate the man who is building from the man who is waiting, never begging for love, never performing wealth, zero tolerance for disrespect, letting go with dignity, removing manipulators without guilt, closing chapters that need to be closed, solving your own problems, refusing to compete for love, building genuine independence, protecting your peace absolutely. Some of this may have landed as indictment, as a mirror held up to choices you have made, patterns you have been in, moments you would take back if you could. And here is what I need you to hear about that. Those moments do not define you. They inform you. Every time you begged when you should have walked away, you learned something about your own worth that no comfortable situation would have taught you. Every time you tolerated what you should have refused, you learned where your actual line is. Every time you waited for rescue, you learned that the waiting itself was the problem. The question is not whether you have made those mistakes. Every man who has ever done anything meaningful has made every single one of them. The question is what you do with the lessons. Plutarch, who spent his life studying the great men of Greece and Rome, trying to understand what separated the ones who flourished from the ones who collapsed, wrote in his Lives that character is not revealed in the exceptional moments. It is revealed in the ordinary ones, in how a man handles the moment when the easy thing and the right thing point in different directions, in what he chooses when no one is watching, in whether he holds his standard when holding it costs him something real. High value is not a destination. It is a daily practice. It is not something you arrive at and then keep automatically. It is something you choose. Every morning when you wake up, every time a situation tests your standard, every time you are offered the comfortable compromise, and you look at it and you decide quietly and without an audience that you are not that man. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. The most powerful man in the ancient world still wrote to himself every single morning. Not because he had mastered these principles, but because mastery requires daily return. Always being built, never finished. Let me speak directly to you now. You came to this video for a reason. Maybe you are in a situation right now that is draining you. A relationship costing more than it is giving. A pattern you keep repeating no matter how clearly you see it. A version of yourself you know exists, but cannot quite consistently become. Maybe you are tired in the deeper way, the way sleep does not fix, the way that comes from living below yourself for too long, from accepting less than you know you deserve, from being everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. If any of that is true, then hear this. You are not broken. You are not too far gone, too old, too damaged, too behind. You are a man who has not yet fully decided who he is, and that decision, made quietly, without applause, without an audience, in this moment, can be the day everything begins to shift. Not because the circumstances change, not because the relationship suddenly gets easier, or the money appears, or the perfect conditions align, but because you decide right now that your worth is not negotiable, that your peace is not optional, that your dignity is not something anyone gets to purchase with attention or affection, that from this moment forward, you live by a different standard. The man you are capable of being is already inside you. He has always been there. He is not waiting for your circumstances to change. He is waiting for you to stop apologizing for him, to stop making yourself smaller so other people are more comfortable, to stop performing a version of yourself designed for someone else's approval, and to finally just be him, fully, consistently, unapologetically. That man, built in silence, refined in difficulty, settled in his own worth, changes everything around him without trying to, without performing, without noise, simply by being completely himself. Now, before you close this video, hit the like button if something in here reached you. Drop a comment and tell me honestly which of these 10 commandments you need to work on most right now. Not the comfortable answer, the real one. This community is built on genuine reflection, and every comment gets read. Share this with one man in your life who needs to hear it. Ancient wisdom was always meant to be passed on. And subscribe to the Stoic Truth and turn on the notification bell, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of conversation. Your life is not waiting for better circumstances. It is waiting for the man you already are to stop holding back. Go be that man. Today. Right now. In the very next decision you make.